Hey Village, this video is going to talk about a topic that I've been wanting to kind of introduce for a while now. I think some of this information is going to surprise you, and it seems like the perfect follow-up to our previous video, which kicked off Foster Care Awareness Month. I talked about the how and the why we became foster parents and started this journey, and I also shared different ways that you can get involved that don't even include becoming a foster parent. But something that really doesn't get talked about are the reasons why kids enter foster care in the first place. And I think we know the big headline. It's abuse and neglect. And I bet if we took a poll on which you think is the more predominant reason, I think most people have it in their mind that it's abuse. So I want to talk about all the different reasons that kids can come into foster care and kind of break them down. This information is helpful for everyone. Most likely you have been in contact with a child or a family who has experienced foster care, whether you know it or not. And if you are a foster parent, some of these are going to feel familiar, but some of them, might be ones that you haven't really thought of before. And if you're about to start your journey to become a foster caregiver, these are really helpful statistics to really get a picture of the kids and families who are coming into care. So now I'm going to pull up a really helpful chart that is really just a big picture of all the different reasons. And like I said, we're going to break these down, but the number one reason that you'll see is neglect. When children are neglected in the home, they're going to be removed from that home and enter into foster care. That's not entirely true, because this is actually just the reasons children are removed from their homes. That doesn't mean that they're automatically going into foster care. They could end up in kinship. So anyway, you can see from this list, number one, you have neglect, which we're gonna break that down since it is the most predominant reason. You then have drug abuse, and that's parent specific, because you'll see lower on the list is when a child is actually experiencing drug abuse or alcohol abuse. The third reason is caretaker inability to cope. And this is something that I wanted to learn a little bit more about, so we're going to talk about that. And then coming in fourth is physical abuse. You also have housing, adequate housing that comes in after that. The child having behavioral problems, so maybe this is them getting removed and placed into a group home. 7% are due to parent incarceration. You also have alcohol abuse following that by the parent. Abandonment, 5%. Then you'll see that 4% of kids are removed due to sexual abuse. 2% are drug abuse with the child. Also 2% is child with a disability, and then relinquishment, 1% is parent death. And then you have alcohol abuse with the child, which comes in at 0% because it's under that 1%. You'll see here that 1% for these numbers equals 2,000 children. So knowing these different reasons are really gonna help you support the child, understand where their trauma is gonna be coming from, and also support the family as a whole to become stronger. And the thread throughout all of these is that these children are entering foster care because their families are in crisis, or maybe they're in crisis in some cases. These are kids ranging from newborns, maybe right out of the hospital, to teens, even like 18 plus. They're still going to be supported through the foster care system. And again, I say foster care, but I'm also talking about kinship as well. And oftentimes these kids have experienced unsafe conditions. And so let's go ahead and jump into neglect. 63% of kids are removed from their home because of neglect. And there are 4 different categories of neglect. You have physical, emotional, medical, and educational. So if a parent is unable to provide for their child in any of those 4 categories, there's a chance that they are going to be removed from their home. And this is where the topic of, what support can we provide these families that are going to keep the kids in the home, not have that additional trauma of disrupting them from their home, but still get those needs met. What can we do before it leads to a disruption? And for neglect, this could look like, leaving a child home alone if it's not age appropriate for them, basically kids without supervision. This also kind of carries over into education, because if a child is not getting to school and, they're missing extended periods of time, the parents aren't making it a priority, that's another reason, within that educational neglect that they could be removed. There's also inadequate food or nutrition. I think this is what we really think of when we think of neglect is, a child without food, without a bed, without housing and shelter, and then a lack of medical care. So if a child is hurt or needs medical attention and the parent isn't providing that's grounds for neglect and removal. And now that we have these numbers, 63% are due to neglect, I think then we start a conversation of, okay, if a parent isn't able to get their kids to school, like what's the reason behind that? Let's not remove them right away. Let's figure out what's going on. Are kids being left, unsupervised because the parents are working and they don't have childcare? How can we get the childcare support so that the parent can work and the child remains safe? And you'll see in the next week or so when I share with you guys this big surprise I've been working on for a few months now, you'll start to connect the dots here. Our message is really one of safe children and strong families. We want to make the family unit strong so that disruption doesn't happen. And then when it comes to the second biggest reason why kids are being removed from their homes and many of them are placed into foster care, you have drug abuse. And unless you've been living under a rock, this really shouldn't surprise you. What's interesting about this though is I was watching a video and it was talking to primary parents who have had their children removed from them. And one lady, it was because of her drug use. It was because she was addicted to, some illegal drug. And when it comes to addiction, and we're removing children because yes, we need to keep the children safe, that doesn't automatically mean that the parents are like, oh, my kids are gone, it's time for me to get clean now. People who have strong addictions, they already have negative consequences in their life. They're really struggling. And again, I don't pretend to know about addiction, but I do have a lot of compassion for, these parents who I'm sure in their heart, they love their children and they are just suffering through this addiction that has taken over. And it's not fair to the kids, and the kids do have a right to be safe. So I'm not trying to justify that we should keep kids in those situations. But again, it's not surprising if you get a placement call and that child has a parent that is really deep into their addiction and they have 2 years to get clean. Well, in the first 2 years of sobriety, people are more likely to relapse. And so that basically means during the case, let's say they are making every effort and they're able to get clean for a period of time, it is likely that they'll relapse. And as a foster caregiver, it's like, no, like you don't want to see that. And you might be, coming from a place of judgment of, why would they do this? Like they were so close. Well, because it's a disease. Addiction is a disease. And so again, this information is really meant to help support caregivers and everyone else who is involved in this system, to really try to understand, what these circumstances actually look like. And this next one is really interesting. And I've mentioned before, I've been trying to look to kind of define these different categories. And I do see some that kind of seem like they mean the same thing. What this means to me, and please correct me in the comments, correct me if I'm wrong, caretaker inability to cope is what I look at as the parent acknowledges that they can't parent effectively. And I think this differs from neglect in the 4 areas because it kind of makes it seem like the caretaker is, the parent is acknowledging that they're unable to care for their child. And this might be the cases that, the parent is coming to Child Protective Services and asking for support and asking for services. And then, it leads to children being removed. So again, I haven't found the exact distinctions of these, and I'm sure there are people out there, I want to learn about this. That's why I'm talking about it. I know a little bit, and I would love to hear from you guys, based on what you know about these different areas. And then of course we have, the 4th reason, which is physical abuse. And this is definitely one where the kids need to be removed from the home. There is no excuse for physical abuse. So I'm not making any excuses, but I will say that again, think about parents who have not had parents. They had a bad example when they were being raised, and that's all they knew. Again, I'm not saying it's right, but these parents need parenting classes. They need interventions that are going to show them, how to properly deal with their emotions and their frustration and anger. We're also dealing with a lot of these families are part of other systems. So they might be at or below the poverty line. So they're dealing with a lot more stress, a lot more factors that are making their life complicated. And, they might not know how to deal with that in a healthy way. What I find really interesting is that 10% of kids who are removed from their home, it's due to housing. And this is a huge problem across the United States specifically. I know of families who are waiting, on waiting lists. They are working. They have 2 parents working, and they can't afford a clean home in an area that is safe. And then of course, some of these issues are compounding. So, a lot of times, if you have one where it's, oh, they don't have housing, maybe it's because there was physical abuse in the home and the safe parent removed the children, but now they have nowhere to go. So some of these things can kind of be intertwined. And we're not going to go through all of these, but I hope that just seeing this list and, putting a number to it, and these are recent numbers, we can kind of get an idea of where our system is right now. And there's this idea shared by some that Child Protective Services is kind of like this pendulum that continues to shift. So depending on where you're located, because this is a state-run program, specifically talking about the United States, you'll have states that have really focused on keeping families together and what services can be put into place that are not going to have the children removed. Well, they'll do that and they'll shift all the way over there, and then there will be a case where, a child is very, very badly hurt. There's possible death. And, of course, that is something that makes the news. And so there's this huge shift, and more kids are now being removed and placed into kinship and foster care. And then there will be a news article that comes out where a child has been badly abused in a foster home, or a child has slipped through the cracks, so to speak, of the system, and then it swings all the way back. And, it's really, again, if we look at the data, if we try to understand the context of, people's lives and why they're being involved in Child Protective Services, like, what can we really do to make a difference? How do we make it so that we don't have these extremes and we start to have a system that really works? Which again is why I'm really behind safe children and strong families. I hope that this information helps you as you are either starting your journey or just reconnecting with the context of the children who are placed with you. These calls that we get, these are real children, real families that are struggling with these issues. How do we support them? And, sometimes it is just giving the kids a safe and supportive home while they try to overcome this, the parents overcome these issues. But maybe there's a little bit more that we can do. And again, be sure to comment below if you have extra information that you want to share around these areas. Like I said, I am not the expert, but I really just find this data fascinating, and I really couldn't get the context behind some of the different categories. So really looking forward to reading all of your comments, and also be sure to let me know other topics that you want to have covered, especially this month with it being Foster Care Awareness Month. That's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, be sure you like and subscribe. Make sure your notifications are on so you don't miss an upload, and I'll see you next time.